Hello and welcome to Solo Travel with Darren. This is episode number 95, I think it is. And today I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different than my usual podcast where I kind of give like step-by-step help on traveling, or if I talk about like different destinations and what they're like. Today is going to be a little bit more theoretical. Today I'm going to be talking about an article that I came across. It's actually kind of an old article called The Case Against Travel. And basically, the article says that traveling is stupid. And so today I want to talk about that article, or at least give my response to it. I think it's kind of funny because like I know I'm a lawyer by trade. That's my profession or whatever. And I spent the early part of my career as a trial lawyer. So I know that cross-examination is kind of how you bring out the truth of everything. And so I think it'd be good, since I obviously promote traveling, I think it'd be good to see what the case is against traveling and why nobody should travel, basically. And that's what this article is about. It's called, it's called The Case Against Travel. It's out of an old New Yorker magazine. The author is Agnes Callard. Last name is Callard. If you want to Google it, you can Google it, read the article for yourself. But anyways, so let's kind of get into it. And let me say, because, in my book, Going Solo, which you can buy on Amazon, Going Solo by Darren Woodfork. You can find it on Amazon. You can buy that book. In my book, I think the first chapter, I talk about the advantages of travel. And I don't remember talking about the disadvantages of traveling in that book. And what's kind of interesting, because in most of the book, I give kind of like both sides of everything. And all the topics in the book. I talk about the good things about online dating when you travel and the bad things about online dating when you travel. I talk about the good things about trains. I talk about the bad things about trains, things like that. So I kind of give both sides and everything else, but I did not give both sides in the advantages and disadvantages of travel in general. And so this article basically gives like the disadvantages. And in my book, you give like a blurb in the beginning of the book, and I think in the blurb I put the quote was, traveling, it leaves you speechless and then turns you into a storyteller. I think that's the one I went with. But there's another quote that is kind of thrown around the travel community, and it's what kind of people always saying that. Traveling, or people who don't travel are like reading one chapter of a book and they don't get to read the rest of the book. Essentially, that's what the sentiment is. I'm not sure. I think that's a little exaggerated, and I'll get into that a little bit about what I think about the positives of travel. Anyway, the article, this New York article, it mentions some philosophers like Socrates and Immanuel Kant and those guys saying that they never traveled from, I guess it was Athens, Greece. They never left. They say Ralph Waldo Emerson, he says that travel is a fool's paradise. A lot of other, and she quotes a lot of other like philosophers that I've never really heard of. But basically, one of the philosophers says that if you travel, that means your life is just super boring at home. And if you have to travel, it's it's a sad state of your own life if that's what you need for excitement. And so she talks about those quotes in the article. Again, I think I kind of dismissed that. Obviously, I think it's the opposite. I'll get into that in a second. But what I will start off by saying is that one of the points that she lays out in the article, and I think it's a fair point, is that she says traveling is a boomerang. And basically she says that when you travel, you're going to come back home. And so you're going to come back home to the exact same life you had before you left. And I do think that that's a fair criticism, I guess, in the sense that I know in my own travels, I know it's always kind of like clockwork. 3 or 4 days before I come home, I start thinking about what I have to do when I get back at home and what's going to be waiting for me and my job and my family and all that stuff. I start thinking about what it's like. So I really don't even enjoy the last couple of days of when I'm overseas, because I'm thinking about coming, what's going to happen when I get back home. And then again, like clockwork, when I get home, everything is the same. And so that's what this criticism is. It's like, people always say that travel changes you and it makes you better and all that stuff. But the reality is that you come back and you're in the exact same situation as you were before you left. Again, I think that's a little bit over, even though I acknowledge that point, I think it's a little bit overstated. And again, what I've always said, and in all my friends and my family, they've heard me say this before, is I think that travel is just a hobby. It's just another hobby that people pick up. I've never said that travel is the end all be all and everybody should travel and all that stuff. The only thing that I've said is that, that Thoreau quote is what I said is that, most men live lives of quiet desperation and they don't do anything besides go to work and, live life, whatever. And so there's no excitement to most guys' life. I've quoted that quote a lot. And I've always said, in order to have a life that's, somewhat exciting, then you can take a trip, you can travel. That's what I've always said. But I've always kind of said that that's just one, hobby. That's just one thing that you can do to have a fun life or whatever. Not everybody needs to travel. I mean, some people, they like to go build model trains in their basement. Some people like to go gardening. Some people like to do scuba diving, things like that. Those are just different hobbies, and traveling, in my mind, is just one of those hobbies that you can pick, to do. So I don't think that, I don't think literally everybody in the world has to take a trip or has to get a passport and all that stuff. I just think that if you're looking for a hobby, traveling is the one I suggest. And that's what this whole podcast is about. That's what my book is about. That's what my YouTube channel is about, all that stuff. But again, in my mind, it's just another hobby that you pick up, and you do it if you enjoy it, and that's it. And so I think that that's pretty much kind of like the whole, I guess, answer to the is traveling just like a waste of time, and that people you basically, one of the criticism in the article is that you go to these places overseas, you go to Rome or you go to Spain or something like that, and that you do things that you would never do back at home. And I guess that's a criticism, I guess. They say, you go in and you look at these paintings where you would never look at a painting in your hometown, or you go on these safaris and you go, you put some eagle on your shoulder or something, stuff that you would never do back at home, things like that. And so basically it's kind of like you're kind of making up stuff, essentially, is what, the article says. And I understand what they're saying, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think because whenever I travel, I always have kind of like the list of top 10 things you're supposed to do in a city. And I guess just by saying, here's what you're supposed to do, basically shows that maybe I don't really want to do it. I just do it since you're supposed to. But again, I think that just kind of, it's a little exaggerated, I guess. It's like if you're going to go somewhere, you're supposed to see the Colosseum or, things like that. And again, I don't think that's a lack of imagination, or I don't think that's, a criticism, but that's what this article says. The article says that you go do things that you would never do at home, and so traveling is kind of like a waste of time and money and all that. Also in the article, she says that traveling is like a contest, which I think is completely wrong. She basically says that people who travel don't like hearing stories from other travelers, and like as if it's like you're trying to one up people on where you've traveled to and things like that. I think that's completely wrong, and I think it's at best a straw man argument. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. I think traveling is one of those things where like everybody likes to talk about, and one of those things where just because somebody went to I don't know, Portugal, it doesn't make my trip to Croatia any worse or any better, or doesn't make me feel any worse or anything like that. It's completely non-judgmental, or it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? And so to think, but she argues that people are like, it's like trying to one up everybody. It's like a big contest, and I think that's completely wrong. You could read the article and see, what she says, but again, I think that that's wrong. But again, like I'm literally talking my own book, I guess. I mean, I have a vested interest in saying that this article is wrong, but like I said, I think it's good to see what the counter argument is, in order to solidify like my position that if you want to take a trip. This podcast is here to help you, and my book is here to take you from never taking a trip, never even thinking about taking a trip by yourself, to all the way to taking a trip and coming back and all that. And that's what my book is about. That's what everything I do on this, in this my podcast, my book, my YouTube channel, things like that. And so, but anyways, I thought this was interesting. Again, it's the article called The Case Against Travel by Agnes Callard. It's in the New Yorker magazine back in 2023, so it's like a couple years old, I guess. But like I said, just Google it if you're interested, and it'll come up in Google. That's where I found it. And so that's basically all I want to talk about today. Thanks for listening. Again, my book is available, Going Solo, How to Plan, Book, and Experience Your First International Trip Alone. That's on Amazon. You can get it now, or get it at Barnes & Noble, anywhere else you buy books. And then also you can check out my YouTube channel, which is Darren's Travels. And then thank you for listening to the podcast. And please leave a rating and review on the podcast, and I appreciate it. Anyways, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks.